Welcome back to the Budget Committee meeting for the afternoon portion of our program. After some discussion, we're going to stick with the programmed agenda items. There should be some future conversation based on questions and concerns raised in this morning's meeting about our 5-year capital direction and how some of the funding as proposed fits into a broader look or a more 5-year plan. But what I'm hearing from my colleagues is that we want to stick with the agenda as originally set, which means having all of the other department heads go in the limited amount of time. We do have a hard stop today at 2:30. So without further ado, thank you, Jeff Johnson, for being flexible and being pushed from this morning's conversation. And thank you for being willing to be our first one queued up for this afternoon.
Great, no problem. Thank you, Chair, Council members. Again, my name is Jeff Johnson. I'm the Executive Director of the Minneapolis Convention Center. I want to point out 2 Convention Center employees here, Chris Hunges and Mark Zerbel, and then also representing Meet Minneapolis, Sandy Christensen. So today I am here to present to you the Convention Center budget as part of the Downtown Assets Plan. The Downtown Assets Fund receives revenue from the hospitality sales taxes. That includes the 0.5% sales tax, the 3% liquor tax, 3% restaurant tax, and 2.125% lodging tax. The entertainment tax, which is 3%, also flows through the Downtown Assets Fund. These hospitality sales taxes support the operation of the Convention Center, the Target Center, Commons, and PV Plaza, and the Convention Center administers the Downtown Assets Plan. When talking about the Minneapolis Convention Center, I am talking about a facility that is among the best operated venues in the world. In 2018, the Convention Center won its 2nd Venue Excellence Award from the International Association of Venue Managers. This award places our staff among an elite group of hospitality professionals. The Convention Center staff serve Minneapolis with passion and dedication. I could talk for hours about our staff. I know that we're at a short time frame, so I won't, but I thought maybe that a more efficient way would be to let our staff talk about who we are and what we do. If it pleases the chair and the committee, I would like to maybe go off a little bit here and show a video that we presented as part of a recruitment video, but that actually what we found out is it is a great way to talk about who we are and what we do from our employees' standpoint. So if that is okay, I would run forward with that.
Did you say it was 3 minutes long?
It's about 3 minutes long. Yeah.
So I did offer that I would ask my colleagues whether or not they wanted to see this 3-minute video. The rest of Jeff Johnson's presentation is very brief. Is there the interest in seeing this video and hearing directly from the employees of this department? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. There seems to be interest in seeing that. So go ahead.
Okay.
I like serving people, you know, and my job is just not only a job where I just come to get a paycheck. It's more than a paycheck. I'm here to make a difference every day. This place is different than other places. Great environment, a safe place to be. Everybody is happy. Everybody is cultural friendly. You feel warm, be around your friends, and mostly I call them family because I've been here almost 17 years.
I'm a lifelong Minneapolitan. I'm a South Minneapolis kid on top of that, so my earliest memories are of living on 16th and Portland, and I could walk to the end of the block and see the old Minneapolis Auditorium. In a lot of ways, working for the Convention Center, working for the city of Minneapolis is coming home. As much as I've worked in other venues where there's a lot of talk about inclusion and diversity, I really see this building walking the walk with it.
And I think Minneapolis is the large city that has so many diversity people. Now we all know why people want to come to Minneapolis. The opportunity, jobs, education, everything. That's why we're all here, my best city.
You know, above and beyond the very tangible benefits of working in this building, the sort of intangibles are just, I mean, I work in my home.
Number one, I provide my kids. Number two, I bought a house 2 years ago, and that was a great feeling, knowing that I have a home and I can pay my mortgage because I have a great job. And recently I bought from my teenager daughter a car, and she's happy.
The idea of working here in this environment with this level of professionals, it's been an incredible experience to begin working here. I think there's a real collaborative energy. Like I see it pretty much every day. It can be a cold world out there, so it's wonderful to be in a place that's as warm as this, you know?
It's not just a building. It's a place you call home. 17 and a half years, that's not easy. And I don't really think it's a building. And when people say it's a building, I get mad. No, this is a beautiful place. Convention Center is my home.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for allowing us to show that. Something special is going on at the Minneapolis Convention Center. The budget that you will hopefully approve in the coming months will place resources where the city's goals and values are being impacted every day. Our activities support over 7,500 jobs in our community. These jobs provide opportunities. You saw that depicted in our video. Many of our staff members tell stories of being the first person in their family to own a home or to send their kids to college. These jobs are also filled with our community members. 55% of our employees are people of color, and we are working towards 50% of our leadership to be people of color, and we are very close to that goal. We have a real opportunity to represent the diversity of Minneapolis to the almost 1 million guests who visit our building each year. Our activities produce tax revenue and economic growth for the city. Not only do the hospitality taxes support our operation and the other downtown assets, we are able to transfer over $30 million a year to the general fund for economic development. A percentage of this money comes from the visitors who travel to Minneapolis to use our amenities. They spend their money on products and services which are taxed, and then these visitors go home leaving great amenities of wonderful restaurants, beautiful hotels, great entertainment for our residents to enjoy. Our activities also provide external awareness to Minneapolis by bringing out-of-town visitors to our city. Nationally and internationally, Minneapolis lacks awareness, but we know that once a visitor experiences Minneapolis, they fall in love. I think we have a mayor who could tell this story a little better than I can. But exposure to Minneapolis allows us to attract more residents, businesses, and tourists to our great city. We know that we at the Convention Center play a major part in the success and growth of Minneapolis into the future. By funding the Convention Center, the Council is tangibly investing in the accomplishment of city's goals. The Downtown Assets Fund brings forth 2 change items for this year that will help provide support for the following initiatives. We ask you to provide $750,000 for the operation of Downtown East Commons. Currently, we have a contract with Green Minneapolis to operate and maintain the Commons. This funding will provide for basic services at the Commons to include things like snow removal, lawn care, planting, garbage removal, utilities, and bathrooms. This funding will not provide for the level of programming and use that we have seen over the first 2 years of operation. Over those 2 years, Green Minneapolis has operated with a budget of $1.5 million because of private fundraised support. In 2019, those private funds are more limited and will only be available if private entities are willing to donate to program the space. We are also asking to provide $250,000 towards the 2019 X Games to help pay for city services needed to help coordinate and implement the event. Not only does this event bring many visitors to Minneapolis, it also reaches an estimated 24 million viewers through the television networks ESPN, ESPN2, and ABC. Showcasing the city as a fun, energetic, and active place will help us compete for the next generation of Minneapolis residents. And that is it. This concludes my formal part of the presentation. I will stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I have some questions about the results information, but I wanted to first yield to any of my colleagues that have questions or comments about some of the new change items being proposed for the convention center. We have council members Schrader and Gordon in queue. Go ahead.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. My question also involves the results, so I can hold if you want to talk about the change items.
Sure. Councilmember Gordon, is your question pertinent to the change items?
Yep.
Okay. We'll do you first and then.
Thanks. I was just curious, are we, how often do we subsidize things like big events like the X Games like this? Is this something that we typically have done with other things in the past? Did we put aside money for the X Games last time they were here?
Councilmember Gordon, Chair Palmisano. We have had the same $250,000 for the X Games for the 2 years that they have been here, and then this would be, in 2019, would be the third year that they are here as part of their bid to come to Minneapolis.
And did we promise them that we do this as part of the bid response? Or?
Councilmember Gordon, Chair Palmisano, this was part of the bid response, correct?
Do we do that with other organizations like, I don't know, we have big events, citywide events, and the Final Four or Super Bowl. Do we give them subsidies like this?
Councilmember Gordon, Chair Palmisano, each bid is different. There are times, and usually it is done through Meet Minneapolis with support from the city to give any types of support or offer any types of support to events when they're coming into the city, and the Meet Minneapolis was engaged in this bid process for the X Games.
It seems like it would be nice if somehow this was absorbed through some of the revenues we think are coming into the city that we're coming back to cover this cost. It seems like a lot of money. I also have concerns about us putting money into the commons. When the stadium got built and approved, I think part of the deal was we weren't going to have to pay for the park there, that we were going to be getting revenues from the parking ramp and from other sources that would, and the Vikings would help pay for operations of the park. In fact, I think when we originally approved the $750,000, there was an understanding that, this other group, this nonprofit's going to pick that up, they're going to fundraise, and they're going to cover these costs eventually. Just step up, Minneapolis, and please help us get over this hurdle. And now I'm hearing you say, well, they're all stepping back. We stepped up, and I guess they're saying, the city's going to take care of it for us now, so we're not going to fundraise as much, and we won't have the same level of support. Is that about right?
Councilmember Gordon, Chair Palmisano. The downtown assets funds are the dollars that are funding both of these change items, and so those taxes are generated through the hospitality taxes, and so they are through people coming downtown and spending money on those areas that I outlined in the beginning. As far as the commons goes itself and the funding mechanism, I guess I'm not the expert on that funding mechanism and what was promised in the beginning of that part. I am charged to oversee the contract that we have with Green Minneapolis, and so I think that's why we're bringing this forward as a change item, is to see if the council would like to do this.
And the $750,000 is a one-time expense?
Councilmember Gordon, Chair Palmisano, it is a one-time expense for 2019, knowing that the park is not dissolving after 2019, and so there is a future to keep the park going.
It was one time last year too, right?
Correct.
Mr. Johnson, can you remind us how much the expenditure was for last year for the commons?
Chair Palmisano, it was $750,000 also.
So this is a continuation of
Correct.
one-time funds for that. Okay. Councilmember Gordon, did you have anything else?
No, thank you.
Okay, I'm not seeing anyone else in queue about these change items, except maybe I do. Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair. I will jump in and I'll say a couple of things about the commons. One is that I think I share a general sense that in a climate where there are some extremely urgent needs, this is a challenging budget item to look at. But I also see a very real benefit to the community for this being there. I think it would be a real shame if we were to allow it to go underfunded right as we got Samotar Crossing opened and right as it's suddenly pedestrian accessible to a much broader and more diverse community that's starting to use it. So it feels to me like there's an opportunity right now to create some urgency for some of the private fundraising. There's an opportunity right now to create some urgency to figure out, there are some challenges in the contract with the Vikings around and with the stadium around things that restrict us from being able to better monetize the park in terms of programming that would generate revenue for the park. That's something that I think we should be talking about as a conversation. I know it's a challenging conversation, but I think my hope is both that we can preserve this funding proposal for this year and also send a real signal of urgency around creating a more sustainable, dedicated funding stream that doesn't come out of the general fund and compete with some of the very urgent needs of the city in the long term. So I think we have a problem to solve. And I think we have not solved it this year, which is why you see the 750 on the change item right now. We do need to solve it.
Thank you. Councilmember Gordon, we were going to move on to results stuff, but did you have another comment that I want to give you priority above those in queue for results?
I'll just keep this going one more step, I guess. And I'm going to do some research on this, but I believe last year's budget, there was some staff direction to come back and look at this park use agreement that we had, and that it might be time and need to amend it. I don't ever think we got a response to that. So I'm going to do some research on that, because I do think before many of your time on the council, we signed an agreement with the Vikings that was not in our favor, and it was poorly done. We had a different finance director back then, and so I would like to look at that again, and I like creating a sense of urgency to let people know. I think the Commons serves a great public purpose these days. I see it, and there are people using it, and it's nice to have open green space down there. So I commend us, I guess, in making sure that we created that when all that was going on. But I would be very interested in seeing some other people coming forward and figuring out a way to fund that. So it's on its own. All right, thanks.
Thank you. For you, Mr. Johnson, we have a couple of results Minneapolis questions or comments, and for that I'll first recognize Councilmember Schrader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Johnson, just wanted to go to the results reporting, especially on the enterprise priorities of increasing workforce diversity. It's on page 3 in the spending with diverse suppliers. We're definitely not heading in the right direction there. You list a couple of things such as recruitment plan and being more targeted. Could you explain a little bit more about how you feel those kind of measures are going? Do you feel that they're still early and they need more time, or are you doing additional things to make sure you're meeting the guidelines?
Councilmember Schrader, Chair Palmisano. I think one of the challenges that we have, and one of the challenges that is really laid out here, is that many of the projects that we do are very large projects, and so we're working with civil rights on SUBP goals, and so as a percentage of the spend, sometimes those goals are small, and so I think that's probably some of what you're seeing here is in 2017, a very large expense came because of the Target Center renovation, and so that is showing obviously that our percentage went down. I think that's more of a math issue in 2017 for sure, but definitely on our large projects we're working with civil rights on those SUBP goals and making sure that we get good subcontractors working for us. On our smaller projects, we have been rededicated and working with the target market program and have been using the target market program vendors much more than even 2 years ago. And so feel strongly that we're going in the right direction, although that graph does not show that.
Just one follow-up. I mean, I think it's most clear on it does help to have the gray area that shows, how many suppliers or diverse suppliers are out there. But just looking at the minority, all genders and minority women, just looks like there are people and vendors out there that we could be using, and just knowing that, just want to make sure that there isn't more the city could be doing, or that we're setting up processes that people aren't able to take advantage of.
Thank you. We'll do as much as we can. Correct.
Thank you. My own question about the results, Minneapolis stuff, is on the 5th page of the results information, and it is about our occupancy rates. And I was hoping that you could just share a little bit more about what is occupancy, right? Does occupancy mean when a certain amount or more of our convention center is full? Does occupancy count if we're hosting a blood drive there or a flu shots there in any given week? Could you just speak to us a little bit more about that?
Sure, Chair Palmisano. So occupancy is contracted events that are in the building, and what percentage of them are throughout. 100% obviously would be a contracted event in every space of our building, every day, every minute of every day. But really 70% is about as high as we could get. When you start to get into the mid 70s or even 80%, it's almost impossible to have one event come in and then have time for that event to go out, because changing over from event to event, there's a couple days that we need in order to clean the building, get the next event in. And so that's what keeps that occupancy where 100% is not attainable. And so obviously trending up to 66% is great. I think if we looked at our peers around the country, most of their occupancies in convention centers our size or bigger is in the 45 to 50%. And so we have always known through a PricewaterhouseCoopers yearly survey that we are much busier than other like convention centers across the country. And so that's a good thing in many ways. In some ways, that also means that we're doing smaller events, more community events, rather than really, really large events that come in and take up space for a week or 2 weeks at a time. So
Sure.
66% is very good as far as the industry goes. Again, once we get to 70% or so, that it's almost impossible for us to hit those numbers.
I see. And that answers some of my next question, which was, what was the benchmark or the industry standard? So that looks really good. But in terms of what is occupancy, does that mean that a certain percentage or more of the building is reserved, or would the convention center see the building as occupied if even your smallest meeting room is being reserved for a meeting on a particular day?
Chair Palmisano, that space would be occupied, but not the entire building. So in order to have 100% occupancy on that day, all space would have to be contracted and occupied. There are events going on in the building right now that take up, one exhibit hall and some meeting rooms. That does not count as 100% occupancy. It counts as the percentage. We also do occupancy by space. So each exhibit hall, we know what that occupancy is for that exhibit hall, the auditorium, the ballroom. We know the specific occupancies for those spaces too.
That's terrific. And so then the total convention center occupancy at 66% is estimated for this year, really means that on average, 66% of your building is occupied for the entire, that is the projection that you will see. That's terrific. I'm curious how much occupancy gets attributed to one-time events. So like the Super Bowl was mentioned, could we expect about 60% in what I would call regular years, or years that we aren't hosting a major national event at the beginning? I guess that's my first part of that question.
Yeah, Chair Palmisano, traditionally we have been in that 60 to 61%. And so you can see in 2018, a large event, meaning the Super Bowl, was about a 5% bump. Noting that we have been busy all year long, and so maybe the Super Bowl isn't the full 5%, but it's probably a majority of that 5% bump that we're seeing in our 2018 occupancy numbers.
That sounds like good news. And the other question I had in terms of occupancy would be one of the interests or advantages that we were sold in getting and securing the Super Bowl was increased exposure of Minneapolis as a place and as a host city to events. Do you expect that this could increase our occupancy rate in the future or get us really closer up to a more consistent 70% number, which is what you say is kind of the maximum?
Chair Palmisano, that's the hope, right? And I know that Meet Minneapolis worked very, very hard during the Super Bowl. I believe it was 65 clients that came in to Minneapolis during that time to really show what we could do as a city for large events. Generally, those numbers and those events are booking years out. And so as we start to think about the years 22, 23, 24, and 25, that's when we'll probably see that quote unquote Super Bowl effect. But I know that there's been at least one client that has signed since the Super Bowl, and that was a part of one of the reasons why they did sign. So it has been helpful to get word out about Minneapolis being a major player in events.
Thank you. Not seeing anybody else in queue, I just want to point out the Talmadge building, and I have to admit that other than the last time this was spoken about during the budget process, I haven't been keeping close track of it. But your analysis of the Talmadge building program, well, it doesn't look so good in terms of revenues and expenses. And can you share with us what the plan is for this space?
Chair Palmisano, I've been working and actually discussing kind of at the front end with Councilmember Goodman about what should the future be of the Talmadge building. At this point, we've got an architect working on a small project. I say small, but a project that would take the Talmadge and make it viable going forward. There are some things that we need to do in order to just make it livable, rentable, and so we will be bringing that forward, hopefully about the end of the year, maybe early next year, with a plan after consulting with Councilmember Goodman on going forward with that plan to keep it going as an office building. And so some of the reasons that you're seeing some of those negative expense versus revenue is because we've been knowing that we're going to have to shut it down for a certain time in order to do some of the renovations. And we've been extending those leases month by month, knowing that it's going to happen. But that's why the expense versus revenue, because we know we're going to have to shut it down during that time frame.
Thank you for that additional context. I don't have any other questions. Do any of my colleagues? With that, I'll move to receive and file the presentation on the Convention Center. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Thank you for your time and your flexibility this afternoon. Next, we're going to shift gears here and invite Mr. Noah Shuckman to come and present to us on his department and the regulatory services budget proposed for 2019. Welcome, Mr. Shuckman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one moment here.
Sure. We'll give you just a minute to get organized there. And as we are waiting, I will just mention to my colleagues that if you're interested in looking at the actual change item pages, the regulatory services one in your budget book begins on page F389, and that Micah Intermill around 10 a.m. sent us the link again to seeing that online. So with that, welcome Noah Shuckman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Council members, Noah Shuckman, Director of Regulatory Services, here to present our portion of the 2019 Mayor's recommended budget related to the department. To my left is a number of my staff. I'll just thank them for their efforts throughout the year and in preparing this. They do excellent work, and we're lucky to have them. Regulatory Services has 5 divisions. You'll see in front of you Animal Care and Control, Fire Inspection Services, Housing Inspection Services, which includes the Strategic Inspections Group, or what was the Problem Properties Unit, Traffic Control, and Operations and Engagement. And I'll specifically call out Operations and engagement, as you know, we reorganized within the department this year, which combined 2 divisions into operations and engagement. The division is responsible for department operations, administration, and community engagement work. We have 3 change items in the mayor's recommended budget for 2019. The first of them is permanent part-time staffing for traffic control. This is a continuation of an ask we've had in previous years, including 2018. This is year 4. It was previously entirely funded with one-time money, and we had made a commitment previously that if it continued to be a need, that we would bring it forward with an ask to start to look at ongoing funds for that. This funding is used to provide traffic control around the increasing major construction the city sees and at stadium and community events around the city, in addition to maintaining service levels in response to the department's 54% increase in hours directing traffic and 92% increase in service calls for 311 over the last 4 years. Of this request, $187,000 is one-time in 2019, which would fund 5 part-time positions, and $147,000 is ongoing, which will fund 4 part-time positions. You will see on the slide in front of you that it is represented as 2 FTE, and I would, if there are questions on that, I'd defer to Mr. Intermill on that, but my understanding is that it is the way that they finance prefers to represent it in the budget, but we would be using it for part-time positions. The funding in this ask would fund traffic control agents, the associated radio and uniform costs in 1 vehicle. These positions would maintain the current capacity of traffic control to do work, including the staff that do enforcement and allowing them to do it with nuance and educating the public wherever possible, which we have found helps to reduce future violations. Traffic control as a division and part-time staff especially are proven effective career entry points for city employment. We have found that staff in the division are particularly representative of the city's diversity, and many traffic control agents move from part-time to full-time employment with the division and then on to other divisions either in the department or around the city enterprise, and it's been one of our big success stories.
If I could pause you here, we have a question from Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Madam Chair. How much of the increased demand is related to like bar close time and public safety strategies that are related to coordination between your department and MPD and community partners?
Madam Chair, Council President Bender, I believe 2 years ago in 2016, we did a pilot program working with MPD to provide staffing at bar close specifically, and that ended in 2016. And we supply staff that would work at bar close if there's a major event happening at the same time, but in general, we do not staff the bar close period specifically, and that is a resource question more than anything. The second of our change items is increased inspections and tenant assistance capacity. With this change item, tenants, now a majority of city residents and comprised predominantly of people of color, will have additional tenant-centric resources available to them to address housing issues and concerns. In the 2018 budget, the council added 1 FTE specifically to provide tenants with a dedicated housing inspector to help with complicated tenant advocacy issues, understanding their legal rights, and connecting to essential resources. The department has assigned in 2018 2 additional existing staff to this effort in an effort to expand and begin institutionalizing this approach. Long term, our goal is for all inspectors to have similar skill sets and expectations around tenant-centered work, and the tenant navigators are a primary step in that process and are serving now in a mentorship capacity and being referred difficult cases from the other inspectors. At the same time, ongoing annual increases in rental properties and large residential structures have placed an increased burden on existing resources. So with these positions, the department can continue to keep growing that tenant-centric work while also continuing field operations. This change item would supply 2 housing inspectors and 2 vehicles associated with them.
I'm not seeing any questions, but I do want to point out that that was one of the things that came out of the Results Minneapolis report that you did as well. And I know it's a concern that council members like Councilmember Goodman and at the time Councilmember Fry have also been working on in past years. So thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And our final change item is the phase sunset of the city's the department's revolving fund. The revolving fund is a special revenue fund the department has used to recoup costs associated with nuisance work in vacant and boarded buildings. In 2011, the City Council directed the department to reduce the fund balance, which was, I think, was fairly high, and so we were asked to bring it down to a lower level. In early 2016, we did a review of the department's budget, including this fund, and that review revealed concerns about the long-term health of the fund. As we've analyzed further, we found that as the economy improved and as the city focused on education and engagement rather than heavy-handed enforcement, revenue has dropped and the balance in the fund has also declined. Starting in 2016, regulatory services engaged the mayor's office and finance in the discussion and took actions to extend the life of the fund. These efforts have continued, and a fiscal note was included in the 2018 budget to address it and to look at it again for the 2019 budget. The 2019 mayor's proposed budget includes $800,000 in one-time funding, which combined with the remaining fund balance and anticipated revenues is projected to carry us through the end of 2019 with that fund. In addition to prior steps the department has taken, we continue to evaluate opportunities for reduced spending, including attrition, to extend the life of the fund. That is the extent of my presentation. I'm happy to stand for questions.
Thank you. We have Councilmember Bender in queue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know that earlier this year there was approval that came through to increase our rental license fees. And maybe this is a question for finance, but I don't see that showing up here. And I know that we frequently don't tie, revenue to spending, but I do have a question about the sustainability of reg services and our ability to keep doing particularly the inspections work. And so that's the question.
I guess I'll look to Micah Innermill for direction on who this question should best be pointed to. I think it's you.
Madam Chair and Council President, so I'll take the financial part of the question and defer to Mr. Shuckman on the viability of future operations component. So yes, Council President, to your point, spending decisions and revenue decisions and expenditure decisions, I think, are made somewhat independent given all of the activity being in the general fund. And so I think that what the increase in rental licensing fees did was reduce property tax subsidies, how it was discussed at the time, on the rental licensure activity as a whole. And that's in the primarily in the general fund. This, there, as Mr. Shuckman noted, there's activity in the revolving fund that, absent this $800,000, would not be sufficient to get through 2019. And so I hope that answers your question.
Mr. Shuckman, did you want to add anything to that?
Madam Chair, committee members, no, I think Mr. Intermill's
Super.
summarized it appropriately.
Thank you. Councilmember Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair Palmisano, and thank you, Mr. Shuckman. I'm curious, your first change order around the traffic enforcement. What's the rationale of 4 part-time versus 2 full-time FTEs?
Madam Chair, Council Vice President, for us, it is a question of flexibility. We're able to schedule more carefully around specific events and days that we have heavy events. So there's days that we would have open streets, a Gopher game, a Vikings game, and a Twins game, potentially all in the fall. Mm-hmm. And so it gives us flexibility to work with those people and to shift schedules around as appropriate.
And then are those the same employees that are doing the day-to-day traffic enforcement duties as well?
Madam Chair, Council Vice President, they are also doing that work as well, yes. It expands our flexibility just in general with the workforce and the workflow that we have coming through the division.
Thank you.
Thank you. Without seeing any other people in queue right now for specific questions about the 2019 budget, I will take the opportunity to dig in a little bit to your results Minneapolis report, and I do need to share that I'm quite impressed. This is one of the most detailed reports that we have. On page 6 of that report, we look at housing inspection services, and something that I wanted just to touch on and ask you about was about complaints. It looks like the large majority of complaints with housing inspection are exterior nuisance complaints, and I'm just curious, what types of issues are they, as we tend to be spending a lot of time on that.
Madam Chair, committee members, exterior nuisance complaints typically are defined as long grass, overhanging bushes and trees, rubbish in the yard, things that you can see. That the reason we get complaints is because people can look out their front door at their neighbor's house and see something that they think is not up to code, and they call that in, and it's something that then we're able to respond to fairly quickly.
And so I appreciate that we're good at responding pretty quickly. How good or effective are we at resolving them over time?
Madam Chair, committee members, typically if those issues are not resolved through our normal course of a written violation notice and a follow-up inspection, the city is able to use outside contract firms to resolve the issue for the homeowner or property owner, and then that is done, that same cost is assessed back to the property owner at a later date.
Thank you. Another piece in the inspections on this page is we're seeing a decrease in inspections. That makes sense to then see a decrease in the number of violations. And in the in what you're naming for the reason is that Elms is being listed, and this isn't the first time I've seen Elms listed as a reason for why something has changed in our data over time. So I'm just curious, or rather I'm concerned, is this going to show us a problem down the line once we do have Elms up and running smoothly with a big bump in violations? And I just am curious of your opinion in that.
Madam Chair, committee members, there's actually two factors to this. One is Elms has had a substantial impact on staff's ability to get back up to speed that they were at prior to Elms' implementation. We began at the back half of 2016 training staff and getting ready for the system. The system was implemented in late 2016, and the impact of that has been felt since in 2017, in particular. That the department has recognized that and spent department resources to work with the system, work with outside contractors to bring the system into a format that works better for us than it did at the beginning. And so that's an ongoing effort. We've also been able to pick back up to speed as we've gone because staff have become more familiar with the system and it is working better. The one piece that I just want to note about the number of violations found is that there really should be a line of demarcation between 2015 and 2016. During that time frame, we also reviewed the way that violations were written and combined violation codes so that we had, so there are fewer violations, but the same number of, fewer orders written, the same number of issues at a property in 2015 would have resulted in 3 violations, and in 2016 may result in 1. And so that is also part of the reason for that decrease.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Councilmember Schrader.
You addressed all my questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Terrific. Well, seeing no other questions before us for Mr. Shuckman, thank you for your time. Thank you for everything you do. I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the Reg Services proposed budget. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Thank you. Next, we have Ms. Giovanelli coming before us with the mayor's proposed budget for his own office for 2019. And I'll just give you a minute or so to get ready, and we'll start up then. For those that are following along online with the budget book, let me just let you know that the mayor's office's budget begins on page F299. So, wow, you're all ready. Welcome.
Thank you. Madam Chair, council members, my name is Giovanelli, Chief of Staff to the Mayor, here to present the Mayor's Office budget for 2019. I think most of you have a general sense of our office, but we have our staff, I guess, in 3 different areas. We've got a policy and outreach team, a constituent services team, and a communications team. Our policy and outreach team works very closely across the city enterprise and with council members and council staff to track the legislative process here. Our communications team works very proactively and reactively at times to address the communication needs of the mayor's office, and oftentimes working in concert with many of you. And our administrative and constituent services team is really the face of our office. They're the folks that greet people when they come in the door, manage the communication back and forth to the residents of Minneapolis, and help with the mayor's schedule as well. And moreover, really I guess the work of our entire team is running alongside the mayor to make sure that we're working towards his 3 priorities, which I know you've all heard many times, but I'll repeat them again. Increasing affordable housing across the city, improving police community relations, and driving toward a stronger and more inclusive economy. The mayor's office has 1 change item for 2019. It is the Director of Strategic Partnerships, and for 1 full-time employee, if I didn't already say that. You all may recall that this was a position that was transferred to the mayor's office from the coordinator's office earlier this year. The person that will fill this role will play a key role in the mayor's office to serve as an external advocate for affordable housing. They will engage and facilitate a broad regional approach to identify and foster new financing and fundraising resources while strengthening existing relationships and partnerships, all in an effort to achieve the city's affordable housing goals. This position has not yet been filled in the mayor's office. It is posted, and the posting, I believe, closes at the end of the day on the 5th of October. And the last time I checked in with Human Resources, we had nearly 30 applicants, and our goal is to hopefully hire somebody by the end of the year. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. I see 1 person in queue right now, Councilmember Schrader.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. If you can talk a little bit more about what's different about this director and how it would, I guess my question is just how this is different than what other directors are doing to get get funding for affordable housing, and also just what's the likelihood that there's success. I mean, I think that this has been a pretty well explored area, that we know the foundations out there, we know a lot of the places we can leverage, and I don't know that a $200,000 position is going to help us get any further along.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Schrader, I think there's sort of an unprecedented attention to the housing crisis, not just happening here in Minneapolis, but across the region. And this is new work to the mayor's office. And so the importance of this role and elevating this role is really the point of this position. And I know it's something we've discussed in the past. And I know it's something that's important to city leadership as well. So I think, it's new in that we haven't had somebody working this extensively to bring all of these regional partners together within the mayor's office.
Well, thank you. That helps a little bit, but I think I'm very passionate about the housing crisis, and I think that this is something that it's going to be more than one mayor, more than any council member or council, and I would love to see a lot more kind of a coordination plan of working with not just council, but also foundations and folks that have been doing this work for decades. That would be helpful.
Thank you. We also have Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Madam Chair. How many full-time employees are currently in the mayor's office?
Madam Chair, Council President Bender, there are 12.
So this would be adding a 13th
That's correct.
full-time ongoing position. Okay. I mean, we had a bit of this discussion early on, and I don't want to put you on the spot. I think there are lots of talented people in the mayor's office who I have enjoyed working with for many years, most of the people who are there now. I do think we're starting to edge toward a bit of imbalance, given our strong council system and how much work we have to do as council members. And so that's just a question for us as a council to consider. The idea of putting another $200,000 ongoing into the mayor's office. You know, the mayor has 2 full-time communications professionals. We rely on our 2 aides in our offices to do all of the work of constituent services, of chairing and attending our committee meetings, of doing our own communications, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And as we, I think, take on more of this policy work, worker protection laws, housing policy, in addition to what used to be more the core work of a council member, we haven't seen any increase in our own staffing capacity or support in the council. So that's my perspective on this. And I say that in that way, because I hope we don't start to set it up as, you know, do we support this particular mayor or these particular staff in the mayor's office, because I know we all have good working relationships, but just rather as we look forward going to the city, what's the best use of $200,000 extra per year focused on housing or any policy priority area. So that's my perspective.
Thank you. Anybody else who would like to make a question, ask a question or share a comment? I'm not seeing anybody in queue. Thank you for your time. With that, I'll take a vote to receive and file the mayor's office's 2019 budget. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. We're at the end of our scheduled presentations today, and we can yield a half hour back to everybody's busy calendars today, or we can take some time and talk a little bit more about the 5-year capital direction. That's not something that we often talk about, but that seems to me to be where some of the dissonance in some of this budgeting work has been. So we have an extra half hour here in our budget, and in the few people I've been able to have individual conversations with, there's a disconnect in whether there's interest in doing that before the Board of Estimate and Taxation sets their maximum levy on Wednesday. So I'll just invite my colleagues to kind of weigh in on that. Did you want to end the budget meeting now, or did you want to use this extra time that we have to talk a little bit about the 5-year strategic direction? All of those in favor of yielding back a half hour into your day, could you just give me an aye, or all those in favor? Aye. Okay. Those that want to stay and have this other conversation? Aye. I think I'd say there's more interest in yielding back a half hour to people's day. But I appreciate that we should have this conversation at some point throughout the budget committees here. And I think that's just to share with the audience some of the conversations were, yes, but that would be a 4-hour conversation. So we know there's a lot of interest around it, and we will queue it up at a more planned time. Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.